The best hacker in the game just came out, and it's Silverwolf. Silverwolf is my favorite Celeron hunter from the bunch, as you can see between these texts between her and Kafka. She also likes to bury her head under her pillow and pinch cute things, and honestly, me too, Silverwolf. Today I'm going to give you guys everything you need to know about our beloved Celeron hunter, and without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let's begin with what Silverwolf does as a character and why she has a really good kit. Silverwolf is a Nihility Quantum Debuffer who is able to inflict a weakness type of an ally onto the enemy, implement bugs onto the enemy that can also reduce speed, attack, or defense, reduce enemy effect resistance of that elemental attack type inflicted onto them, with an additional high chance of reducing all type resistances of enemies, and has defense reduction with her ultimate. To begin with her skill, which is one of the most important things in her kit, she will inflict the type weakness that the enemy is missing, which has been tested numerous times, and through results that I have achieved, she inflicts the type that they are missing and reduces their resistance to that typing, which is really powerful. One thing to note is that only the most recent element will be inflicted onto the enemy and remain for a few turns, such as if you had a fire weakness onto the enemy and the enemy isn't weak to fire or quantum naturally, and you use your skill and you now have a quantum weakness onto the enemy, it'll replace the initial fire weakness inflicted. Now if you have numerous elements on your team, then it'll be as if it was a coin flip as to which element is inflicted, but I'll go into the ways to possibly manipulate this once we discuss team comps. As for her bugs, which are through her talent awaiting system response, they have a base chance to be inflicted similarly to her skill, and while the bugs are at random as to what will be inflicted from the speed, attack, and defense, you can inflict all of these bugs onto the enemy, which is very nice to have, and her bugs have a chance to be inflicted with anything she does, which could be her normal attack, skill, ultimate. If she randomly wanted to grab a basketball and dunk on them, that would probably work as well, and so on. Weakness breaking the enemy can also inflict a bug through one of her traces, and as a result, the enemy will be debuffed at majority, if not at all times, which is very powerful. Now for her defense reduction though, through her ultimate. She's able to have a high base chance to inflict the enemy with a hefty defense reduction and deal her own damage to the enemy afterwards, which can result in the enemy having a massive defense reduction from her ultimate, bugs, and so on, which will allow your main DPS to wipe the floor with them. Another thing to note is she will inflict her debuffs and then inflict damage onto the enemy, which allows her to take advantage damage-wise of her own bugs being inflicted onto the enemy. As for her traces, they add a lot of utility to her base kit. Her first unlockable trace, Generate, allows her bug duration to be extended for 1 turn. Every time an enemy is inflicted with weakness break, Silverwolf has a 65 base chance of implanting a random bug onto the enemy. This will allow Silverwolf to inflict bugs frequently onto enemies since she doesn't need to be the one weakness breaking them. It just states an enemy being weakness broken will allow her to have a chance to inflict bugs. As for her next unlockable trace, Eject, the duration of the weakness implantation by Silverwolf's skill increases by 1 turn. This is an amazing trace as it allows Silverwolf to be more skill point efficient and allows your weakness type infliction to last longer on the enemy. For her last trace, Side Note, when numerous bugs are inflicted onto the enemy, she's able to reduce their ult type resistance even further, which is always nice to have. Overall, Silverwolf has an incredible base kit with immense potential and can be very skill point efficient, since if you have a weakness you want to inflict onto the enemy, the turns that it remains can be longer, which means you can primarily normal attack and use her ultimate, and as a result, that allows you to have more skill point regeneration over time, and allows her to be a battery in a sense for your skill points. But now let's get into how to build our adorable Celeron hunter. Regarding how to build her, for relics, you'll want the Quantum set, which is Genius of the Brilliant Stars, and since she's able to inflict weaknesses onto the enemy, she has an easy way to take advantage of the 4-piece requirement of the enemy being weak to quantum, for an additional 10% of their defense being ignored. If you don't have the Quantum set, then I would go for the Musketeer set as a starter set, or the Break set if you intend to break and entangle enemies with Silverwolf as a secondary recommendation. As for her planar spheres, the one I recommend the most is the Pan-Galactic set, which increases her effect hit rate by 10%, and you can gain 25% attack maximum based on 25% of your effect hit rate. Since she wants a lot of effect hit rate, which I'll get into shortly, she can effectively get the 25% attack increase as long as she has 100% effect hit rate or greater. For a secondary recommendation, possibly the Energy Regeneration set, the Ageless set, and so on. I personally think though the Pan-Galactic set will be her absolute best bet. Now for the main and substats, you'll want an effect hit rate body piece, preferably gold for the 43% effect hit rate stat. Some effect hit rate substats as well, and as for her boots, you'll want speed. Since she has a natural speed of 107, you'll only need speed boots and one speed stat, not even any rolls, just one speed stat, in order to acquire 134 speed, which will allow her to move twice in some turn cycles. I did a calculation for more speed, which is the 107 and then 64 speed, which will give her 171 speed and allow her to move twice almost every turn order as shown here, but I don't recommend this since you'll be giving up a lot of effect hit rate, attack, crit, and so on for your substats. Of course, if there is a number of speed that she can obtain and then you possibly get a speed boost from a character like Ting Yun, then that could possibly be a different story. However, if you're using Ting Yun and Silverwolf together, I would assume there is a main DPS, so you're likely not going to be using Ting Yun's skill on Silverwolf as is. So just for a baseline for the speed, I would just recommend the 134. As for your rope, I recommend energy or break the most for utility purposes. You can also go for attack, but I just think energy regeneration or break is the most efficient, and of course you want a quantum sphere for damage output. Energy regeneration rope allows her to use her ultimate more frequently, which is really nice for just having additional damage and keeping the enemy's defense reduction at almost all times if possible. I recommend break though if you intend to use her to break the enemies often and use entanglement on the enemies, which is also a powerful option. As for substats, I would prioritize effect hit rate first, then your crits, then your attack, or break effect, depending on what you're going for. And of course, one speed substat. Just try to get one if possible. Just one. It'll be okay. Regarding effect hit rate though, the reason why it matters is because enemies have resistances. Due to them having resistances, you'll need effect hit rate to assist your overall chance to land a debuff, which is based on your base chance to determine how much effect hit rate you will need. As for how much effect hit rate she needs though, I calculated this, and in the case you're fighting a boss enemy, which most resistances consist of 50% for boss enemies, which I will be using as a baseline for our bugs and skills. For her bugs at level 7, you'll need roughly 109.87 or 110 effect hit rate for a 70% overall chance to land your bugs. For your skill at level 7, you'll need roughly, for a 70% chance to land, you would need about 75 effect hit rate, which is if you have enough substats, traces, etc., you can get away with possibly no effect hit rate body piece if you were fine with the 70% chance overall just for your skill. Now for an 80% chance overall, you will need 98.76 or rounded up to 99 effect hit rate. For a 90% overall chance, you'll need 122 effect hit rate. And lastly, for that wonderful 100%, you will need 147 effect hit rate. This is pretty hard to get, but if the RNG blesses you with substats, then it'll be a-okay. As you see though, Silverwolf needs a lot of effect hit rate for her overall chances to be high to land her debuffs at a very consistent rate. And because of this, I would prioritize getting effect hit rate in your subs or attempting to get them. And as for what to prioritize leveling on Silverwolf, I would recommend skill, then talent, then ultimate, and for traces, I would pick trace 4, then 2, and then lastly trace 6 for my own recommendations. Leveling up her skill, talent, and ultimate will be very useful, and her traces are also incredible to pick up. Now though, let's get into her best light cones. There are mainly only 3 light cones I'd suggest on Silverwolf, but for most, I would primarily suggest the free light cone we will be able to get that can also be superimposed 5. This light cone being before the tutorial mission starts, which is such an adorable name, and this light cone allows you at superimposed 1 to have a 20% additional effect hit rate and regenerate 4 energy from attacking defense reduced enemies. And at superimposed 5, it'll be 40% effect hit rate and 8 energy will be regenerated, which allows her to effectively get 40% effect hit rate for her effect hit rate requirements, as I mentioned previously, to hit bugs and skills more often, and allows her to get her ultimate more frequently, since her ultimate allows her to cause defense reduction and one of her bugs allows her to as well, which means she'll be able to consistently regenerate energy, and as a result, this light cone is insanely good for all players to take advantage of. Her signature light cone is also very good as it gives you effect hit rate, crit, and allows for an additional debuff that'll increase how much damage you do to the enemy, and as a result, increases her damage potential. The last light cone I'd recommend is Welt. I don't really recommend it though more than the free-to-play one whatsoever, but let me get into what Welt can do. Welt can be pretty good for damage potential, and mainly if you only care about your skill having additional effect hit rate, but I'd still recommend, once again, the free light cone over Welt, since the overall effect hit rate increase for just having an overall increase for everything is definitely better in my opinion than just the skill, and regenerating energy is very strong to take advantage of. But now, let's get into team comps. For team comps, I recommend numerous concepts, which is mono comps, or rather 3 of the same element, and silver wolf comps, duo comps, which consists of 2 different elements, and 4 different element comps, and I'll explain how all of these can possibly work. For mono-like comps, a strong comp I can recommend, for example, is Jingyuin, Bailu, Tingyun, and Silverwolf. This team can be very skill point efficient, and Silverwolf is able to inflict the type weakness onto the enemy, and if the enemy is already weak to Quantum, then it'll be a lightning inflictation, which is what I meant by possibly manipulating her skill. As a result, Jingyuin can wipe the floor with the enemy pretty well. Another mono-like comp I could possibly recommend is Japar, Yingqing, maybe Pela, and Silverwolf, who can freeze enemies and also debuff them frequently. As for dual element comps, I recommend ideas like Serval, Zila, Silverwolf, Bailu, since if the enemy has one weakness inflicted onto them, you could take advantage of dual comps being able to defeat enemies, and a lot of things are currently weak to Quantum or Lightning, which is great. You'll be able to manipulate the skill to inflict the missing element. Another idea can be Silverwolf, Himiko, Zila, or Xingshui, and possibly Fire MC. Dual element comp once again, and what's good about Himiko is how often fire weak enemies get weakness broken, since when you unlock that Silverwolf trace I mentioned previously, now they'll have a chance to be inflicted with a bug, which your team can highly take advantage of. As for different elements, this can work if the enemy is weak to certain elements already on your team. For example, let's say you had Dan Heng, Fire MC, Natasha, and Silverwolf. If the enemy is weak to Quantum, Physical, and Fire, then Silverwolf will inflict Wind onto the enemy, which means Dan Heng, who is your main DPS on the team, can take advantage of this fully. Overall, there are many possible combinations of team comps you could do with Silverwolf. You primarily just have to be aware of the elements the enemy you are fighting up against is weak to and what sort of team comp you're attempting to do. In the future though, I believe Mono Quantum will exist with Silverwolf, Zila or Xingshui, Fu Xuan, and whoever the other Quantum would be, which in my opinion will be a very strong comp for the future. Now, let's get into Eidolons. For her Eidolons, I wouldn't recommend them unless you're trying to do E2 or beyond, and if your wallet can handle the emotional damage that will be caused to it, unfortunately. And then I would personally say if it can't handle it, go for it. E2 allows you to reduce the resistance of any enemy by 20%, which means now that 50% resistance I mentioned earlier is now 30%, which means now you can build less effect hit rate and focus more on damage potential. Her fourth one allows her ultimate to do more damage depending on how many debuffs are on the enemy, which can greatly increase her ult's damage potential. As for her last Eidolon, it increases her damage dealt to enemies depending on the debuffs once again, which can result in her damage potential increasing by quite a lot. Overall, Silverwolf has great Eidolons and they are worth considering if you want your Silverwolf to focus a lot more on her own damage potential. Now, the last thing I'd like to discuss is how you play her and the playstyle. So personally, I recommended the 134 speed tier with the assumption that she will be the fastest character on your team. The reason why this is good is because if she's able to go first in the turn order, that will allow her to inflict the weakness typing onto the enemy immediately, which is very, very useful. So if you do have Zila on your team, and I know Zila's skill is able to give her more speed, but let's say in the beginning of the battle, your Silverwolf naturally has more speed than your Zila. Great, now you're able to go first and inflict the weakness onto the enemy and you can go to town with that. Another thing I'd like to mention is, of course, once you use that skill, now you can normal attack quite frequently, which once again allows her to be a battery for your team, and your team will be very skill point positive, which is always a great thing. So overall, I think it's pretty easy to use her playstyle wise. I would just try to make sure she's the fastest on your team if possible and fully take advantage of that. And of course, build enough effect hit rate so you can get as many bugs and debuffs on the enemy as possible so your team can fully take advantage of this. And that, everyone, is my ultimate guide on Silverwolf. I had so much fun extensively researching this character, testing her when she came out, and getting to see the potential of my favorite Celeron Hunter. I hope this guide helps you all out on how Silverwolf functions, how to build her, and so on. And if you did enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe for more Starled content from me, and I hope to see you all next time.